Are you a squirrel nut who dreams of overrunning your enemies with overfed, fat squirrels? Well, stick around because Camellia might be the commander for you. Camellia the Seedmiser is a 3-mana squirrel warlock who has menace and gives other squirrels you control menace, which will be pretty relevant later in the deck tech. Then the most interesting part of the commander is whenever you sacrifice one or more foods, you get to create 1 green squirrel creature token. Then you can also pay 2 mana and exile 3 cards from your graveyard or sacrifice a food. And you can pump each other squirrel you control with a +1/+1 counter. Meaning that once you have enough of a board, Camellia can start to turn your army of small squirrels into big threats. Looking at Camellia, it's pretty clear that food is going to be a big theme in this deck. But after playtesting our first couple iterations, we realized something that wasn't completely obvious in deck building. So, Senpai, you can talk about the food first.
Alright, so food is crucial to making this whole engine work because everything Camellia does needs food. Food creates squirrels, and food also pumps your board. At first I thought food was going to be a pretty well supported theme after the recent sets, but digging into the card pool we realized it's actually still quite weak. But still, there's quite a lot to draw from, so show them what you found. Cards from Eldraine are some of the best sources for food, as most of them can either tap to create a food with some mana, or create a food on combat. The deck also plays removal that leaves food behind. Giant Skewer is an interesting equipment here since it creates food on combat damage, but it also plays well with the menace part of Camellia and also giving all your squirrels menace. Lord of the Rings surprisingly really saved the food theme by having Hobbit cards that create food. Peregrine Took is one of the best cards from this set, as he creates food whenever Camellia creates a squirrel, thus refunding the food token you spent, or letting your other food generators make an additional food. Rapacious Guest is similar to Giant Skewer in how they create food whenever one or more of your creatures you control deal combat damage to a player. If you split up your creatures and attack 3 players, you can get up to 3 food tokens per combat. Other good food generators include the Underworld Cookbook, which lets you discard cards to make food. Tireless Provisioner creates food from landfall triggers, or Transmutation Font from Thunder Junction that just makes a food or clue or blood, and you can also convert them into an artifact like Acorn Catapult, Academy Manufactor, or Chitter Spitter. With so many food generators, we also have food synergy cards like Eleanor Gardner, who finds you a land after you crack a food at end step, Knight of the Sweet's Revenge, which turns food into mana rocks, but also can be used as a finisher later to pump your board based on all the food you have on board. And we also have Trail of Crumbs, which lets you crack food, pay a mana, and reveal the top 2 cards and put a permanent card from the top of your deck into your hand. So, a nice way to get some more cards back every time you crack a food. Then switching to squirrels, we were surprised by how few good squirrel generators there are. So we're playing any card that can continuously create squirrel tokens, like Acorn Catapult, Chatterfang, Chitter Spitter, Cloakwood Hermit, Squirrel Nest, Nut Collector, and Animal Friend. Making squirrel tokens really helps speed up the process because you don't have to spend 2 mana to crack a food to make 1 squirrel. But just having food and squirrel generators alone didn't really make a good enough deck, so Senpai's gonna talk about how we improved it. What we learned in our testing was we didn't play enough food cards in the beginning, and Camellia was often caught with a pretty weak board state with not enough food to play with. So that's why we ended up playing 17 food generators and 6 food spells, which is about a quarter of the deck. To make Camellia work better, we noticed that token doubling is especially important to make sure that you can develop a pretty good board and keep pace with your opponents. But most of these cards are quite expensive, so our list only has Parallel Lives and a second Harvest. The second issue we found was that incremental development just wasn't quite good enough. So we looked at other better sources for both of these tokens. And the best sources for both food and squirrels come from ETB triggers. We noticed that some of the best synergies with the food tokens are life gain cards from the Witherbloom Precon in Strixhaven. These cards return permanents from the graveyard to your hand or the battlefield after gaining life. So by pairing cards like these and also something like Hell's Caretaker, we can basically cycle through creatures or sacrifice them to something like Dockside Chef to create a large amount of tokens in one go. So this is a much faster way for you to accumulate a lot of tokens quickly so that you can then develop your board faster. And also we wanted to note that Seedborn Muse is very useful in this deck as a lot of mana gets spent on activations. Seedborn Muse lets you crack food tokens or create tokens with other permanents like Chitter Spitter per turn cycle that you get to untap, so that should really help you dominate the game. While Camellia can help develop a strong board, I imagine we'll need a real finisher to close out the game after the squirrels have dealt enough damage across the board. So taking a line from older competitive elf decks of the past that also play Deranged Hermit, funnily enough, we added Natural Order to turn your squirrel tokens or early elf into a finisher like Critter with Behemoth. If Behemoth is out of your budget, Blossoming Bogbeast is a good alternative that we also play in the deck, as it synergizes well with the life gain from food. Enrace Forerunners is also another decent overrun effect as well, at a pretty cheap price. Some last cards we added for card draw includes Orin Frostfang to leverage the menace that Camellia gives to your squirrels. Toski is a good squirrel to play, and Braid's Arisen Nightmare is another great card for you to draw up to 3 cards per turn by sacrificing a permanent like a squirrel token or a food token. Oh, let me talk about my card. Oh, yeah, we let YaBoi add a card. I added the Ozolith because Camellias gives all your squirrel boys the counters, right? So when your opponents are like, nah, I'm gonna bring the wrath of all the gods and destroy your board, then you can be like, nah, that's cool. I'ma keep all my counters like they're acorns, and I'ma beef up another boy later. So how do you like them acorns? Thanks for that. In terms of how you play the deck, it's quite simple. You want to mulligan for hands that have a lot of food generators because that's the main resource you need for the game. But an ideal hand will also have some sources of early mana, so you can start to make food and also crack them to create squirrels. So that's the deck. Thanks for watching. Designer, you want to close this out, right? You two are so boring, I'm sure no one's watching at this point. We're going to be covering Bloomburrow all week, so you definitely want to subscribe. The deck list is in the description box below, and we all actually tried to guess what Camellia does, so if you want to see our designs of the Seedmiser, which I think is a little bit better, but you know, whatever, you want to check out this video right here. Or if you want another super cool deck tech made by those 3 geniuses, you can check out the Ezio deck tech with Assassin's Creed cards only right here. Thanks for watching. Enjoy Bloomburrow. Bye.